Shares of both companies closed slightly down. Time Warner shares closing at under $87 apiece, well below the buyout offer of $107.50 a share. Meantime, politicians and competitors are already raising the red flag. While AT&T and Time Warner don't directly compete with each other, critics of the deal say it would concentrate too much power in the media industry in too few hands. The acquisition would give AT&T ownership over HBO, CNN, Warner Brothers, and content like Game of Thrones and the Batman movies to fill its mobile, pay TV, and internet services. Joining me now from New York, our Bloomberg News media reporter Jerry Smith and TAP TV CEO and former president of CNN, John Klein. John and Jerry, thank you both so much for joining us. John, I will start with you. AT&T says they're committed to maintaining the independence of CNN. Do you believe them, and do you believe it's possible?
Well, I believe that they're smart business people who understand the value of an independent, strong, thriving, aggressive CNN. So, for now, there's no reason to doubt it. The real test will come when a company like AT&T, which is going to find itself in more controversial news stories than Time Warner, the entertainment company, had in the past. When that happens, we'll see how tolerant they are of being covered aggressively by the news network that they own.
Jerry, how about you? Do you believe them, and how hard a sell is this going to be with regulators?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for now you have to take AT&T at its word. It is going to be a tough sell for in Washington. This is very similar to a deal that Comcast did when it acquired NBC Universal. And that deal was approved by regulators, but Comcast had to agree to a lot of really tough conditions that in some ways has really hamstrung NBC in the way that it can do business.
So, John, Jerry mentioning Comcast's acquisition of NBC. In your experience, did that impact NBC at all?
It doesn't seem to have from the outside, except maybe in a sense providing a little more clarity of management, a little more strategic management. So, CNN, too, has been through several rounds of acquisitions in its lifetime. And there are a lot of people still at CNN who lived through the acquisition of Turner Broadcasting by Time Warner and then the merger of AOL and Time Warner. The difference here, of course, is that those earlier acquirers had a journalistic heritage. Both of them did. AT&T doesn't. In a strange way, that might help. It might make it easier because this is a vertical integration, not horizontal. There won't be as much fighting over common ground as there would have been, say, if Rupert Murdoch would have succeeded in acquiring Time Warner. Can you imagine, not only Fox News and CNN trying to live together, but FX cable channel and TNT or TBS fighting over the pie. So maybe it'll be easier to get along because of that.
BTIG analyst Rich Greenfield was on Bloomberg Television earlier today talking about the inefficiencies of big cable companies and why this could be a smart move. Take a listen to what Rich Greenfield had to say.
The internet disrupts inefficiency. This has been very inefficient. You had to buy an entire huge package of channels. You didn't want most of those channels, and on most of the channels, like AMC, you may love Walking Dead, but you were paying for AMC for the entire year for that whole network for one show. The internet disrupts that inefficiency, and I think that's the early stages of what's happening. Just like it's happened to music, just like happened to publishing, we're seeing that unwind, and Jeff was smart enough at Time Warner, Jeff Bewkes was smart enough to get out.
Jerry, given what's going on in the broader media landscape already, AT&T integrating DirecTV, Verizon trying to buy Yahoo, why does AT&T actually want to do this and want to do this right now?
Well, I mean, you can see that the lines between entertainment and telecom and technology are all starting to blur right now. I mean, the big trend happening in the television industry is more and more people are cutting the cord. I mean, the pay TV industry has peaked and it's starting to slowly decline. And that's putting real pressure on both AT&T, which delivers video service through DirecTV, and Time Warner, which makes its money off of, selling both advertising on television and collecting subscriber fees.
So, John, do you think that AT&T owning CNN could help CNN in any way? I mean, if you were running CNN right now, what would you be thinking to yourself?
Well, there's always the possibility of getting more resources to fund the kind of acquisition or internal development or R&D that is going to be required as the media landscape completely changes. I mean, just in the past 12 months, Facebook and Snapchat have gotten to 20 billion video views delivered per day. That's 4 times what it was a little over a year ago. Where is that number going to be by the time this deal clears regulatory hurdles, right? And that's the media environment that AT&T and Time Warner find themselves in, one in which the consumer is the biggest distributor of content in the world, bigger than Comcast, bigger than AT&T. You are watching video that your friends sent you, featuring sometimes your friends and sometimes famous people who you feel you know. And that's all threatening to escape the control of the content creators and the content distributors. And so AT&T and Time Warner are trying to wrap their arms around that. What it means for CNN is they've got to figure out ways that, you know, when this TV remote, that's what your phone is today, it's a TV remote. The battle for that TV remote means that every content creator, whether it's news or entertainment or sports, has to figure out a way to become must-have content that a viewer will pay for, because we're entering a subscription-oriented media environment now.
Well, this pending deal sure to dominate media headlines over the next weeks and months. John Klein, CEO of TAP, former president of CNN, Jerry Smith, who covers media for Bloomberg News. Thank you both so very much. Staying with this story, earlier today I caught up with one of AT&T's biggest rivals, T-Mobile CEO John Legere, who didn't hold back when he slammed the potential deal as a diversity tactic on the back of AT&T's lackluster earnings results.
Ever since AT&T bought DirecTV in 2014, they have not gained a single postpaid customer, and they've been the biggest contributor to our success. So I can only say in the short term, this distraction with them trying to take over the entertainment industry is going to be a boom for the, for the short-term future of T-Mobile's growth.
But what about the long term? Sure, you are gaining subscribers, but your competitors are making moves that they believe put themselves in a better position for the future, a more powerful position, a more diversified position. You know, what happens over the longer term when you're just a carrier?
Okay, well, again, what's important, Emily, is if you, even AT&T announced earnings today, Verizon announced earnings last week, they are diversifying because the business that they're in is shrinking. So, and we're the reason that's shrinking. We have a sustainable growth business in the wireless industry. Verizon and AT&T need to create new revenue streams. Each new one is falling off. UVerse is falling. Wireless is falling. Now, when you move more to the strategic concept of how do you take the 70 million customers that we have with these mobile devices and provide them access to all of the content that they want to view, I don't see the need to own and control the content the way AT&T is. Already with Binge On and with T-Mobile One, we have an ability for our customers to view on a mobile basis, and there are so many ways that I can innovate to be an aggregator of content and a search and discover capability on content by others. And a big part of this deal with AT&T and Time Warner will be them ensuring the government that they're not going to close down optionality for everybody else on the content that they have. Certainly, I would hope.
So you've said there'll be a long road ahead for AT&T and Time Warner. Would you say the same about Verizon and Yahoo? Of course, they're in the middle of a pending acquisition, but now Yahoo has been, potentially crippled by a massive hack attack.
Yeah, what a mess. I feel really bad. But I do wonder about Verizon's strategy of buying iconic 1980s internet companies at great costs when, by the way, very surprisingly, their wireless numbers were really weak, very low. As you know, though, Emily, this is another new business model. It's an attempt to get into the advertising space. And again, let's say even with their AOL purchase, the things that they can do with AOL, you don't think they'll sell to me? So, it's a matter of owning and controlling and whether or not you have to do that.
T-Mobile CEO John Legere there, not mincing words. Up next, from a massive tax bill in Europe to the debut of the iPhone 7, we will break down everything to watch for in Apple's earnings report Tuesday. This is Bloomberg. It is a big week of earnings in the tech sector. We're waiting on Apple Tuesday after the closing bell. Wednesday, we're expected to get earnings from Tesla and SolarCity. Thursday, we'll be watching for Twitter, which just moved its report to the pre-market, as well as Amazon and Alphabet after the bell. Our Bloomberg executive editor of tech, Tom Giles, with me here now. So let's start with Apple. What are we going to be watching for over the last several weeks? There's been a lot to talk about given the Samsung recall and how Apple could potentially benefit.
Right. So the big question is, how did the iPhone 7 do? Remember, this is not a revolutionary phone, evolutionary. So at the beginning, there was a question about, does this have enough whiz-bang features to really get it out of the stores and into people's hands? We talked to analysts who are pretty optimistic about the numbers. 45 million is the estimate that we're hearing. So that's a lot of iPhones. A lot of things happened. Carriers really backed it. Samsung's woes, they were taking the Note 7 off of shelves, so you had an alternative there. And this is just kind of the end of the cycle for a lot of phones. My iPhone 6 is had it, so I need to upgrade. I'm one of those people.
Mine keeps dying too.
I missed this quarter, but anyway, so yeah, I think iPhone 7 is going to do very, very well for them, though not enough to get the revenue up. Overall, revenue will still be down a third quarter, although not as much as the last 2 quarters.
All right, well, we're going to be watching that one closely. Interesting hearing from John Legere there that he didn't think this would have a big hit, as big a hit on Samsung as some were talking about. Of course, Samsung is they're partners, but it'll be interesting to see how those numbers play out in results.
Absolutely. It's a combination of things for Apple this quarter, definitely.
Right. Amazon as well, shares up this morning after Goldman Sachs raised its price target, maintaining a buy. They're, that particular analyst is excited about AWS and seeing more progress there.
There's a lot of excitement around Amazon. Every other day, it seems someone comes out with 1,000 plus price targets. So how much further can this go? Third quarter Amazon, remember, is a big spending, big investment quarter. So you're going to expect margins to get hit. Spencer Soper, our colleague in Seattle, has been running the numbers. We actually might see a widening of margins a little bit, and that is due to, as you said, Amazon Web Services. Small, medium-sized businesses need cloud computing services, they go to AWS, and that's really profitable for Amazon. That's a big boost to them. At a time when they are continuing to invest in programming, they're continuing to invest in warehouses, and all those warehouses, that original programming costs a lot of money. That dents your profitability. But you got AWS and you got Amazon Prime. They had their Prime, their big marketing splash in July. They get lots of people signing up for Prime, and Prime is huge because it locks you in.
Right. Chamath Palihapitiya of Social Capital, one of the Amazon bulls, believes it can have a multi-trillion-dollar market cap down the line. I'm sure he will be pleased to see widened margins. And what about Alphabet? We're going to be focused on mobile ad revenue. We're also going to be looking at YouTube. They don't break out those numbers.
Right.
And also the other bets, these other Alphabet holding companies that lose money, as far as we know.
Absolutely. Amazon, Alphabet has done us, all a solid by giving us more information, more visibility into how those other businesses are doing. Losing lots of money, but they make up for it in spades with basically their core advertising business. Big milestone for them. They're now actually, I read, getting more revenue from mobile than laptop. YouTube is huge. So all of those are big revenue generators for Alphabet. And they give the company a lot of leeway to experiment in these other areas. We want to hear more about how Nest is doing. You've seen the headlines. You've read the stories about how difficult it's been for them to get products out the door. There's been a lot of management upheaval there. At the same time, you have Ruth Porat, the CFO, coming in and exercising a great deal of discipline, wanting people to get these new businesses. Let's get them to profitability. Let's stop just talking about them. Let's just stop experimenting a little bit, and let's look at the bottom line impact. So there's definitely going to be more visibility into that. All
right, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Twitter. Your team will be keeping us all apprised. Tom Giles, our executive editor for tech, thanks so much for weighing in. Still to come, the sites behind so many of the videos on your Facebook feed are banding together with a big-name backer at $100 million. Thrillist co-founder Ben Lehrer joins us to discuss the new venture next. This is Bloomberg. Media consolidation is the top story of the day, with AT&T proposing an $85 billion deal for Time Warner, a deal many say would rewrite the media landscape and cap a wave of other much smaller tie-ups we've been watching, including Time Warner's Turner investing in Refinery 29 and Mashable, Univision buying a stake in The Onion, and later the remnants of Gawker. Add to that Group 9, a new media holding company born out of the consolidation of Thrillist Media Group and other short-form shareable content makers like The Dodo and Now This, along with a $100 million investment by Discovery Communications. We asked Discovery CEO David Zaslav last week whether the move was a way of hedging his bets.
When it comes to people consuming brands on television, our business is growing and it's quite strong. But as they start to consume content on other platforms, we just need to make sure our IP is on every platform, and we're really trying to make sure we get as much share of audience on each one.
Joining us now from New York for more on the deal, Group 9 Media CEO Ben Lair. Ben, great to have you back here on the show. So, of course, AT&T-Time Warner, the subject of the day, more media consolidation. How should we view what you're doing in the context of that?
Well, I predicted this, clearly. No, I mean, I think you can expect more consolidation to be coming. This looks a lot like the 1980s in sort of the rise of cable TV, where you saw these individual brands get built up and eventually come together and form these media holding companies. And I think you're going to see a similar thing happen with digital, with a bunch of brands that have been being built, that have built big audiences, but that are not necessarily individually getting the kind of scale that they need to really have leverage with the platforms, really have leverage with advertisers. And so Group 9 is an effort to take a bunch of digital, mobile, video-first brands and put them together to create something bigger.
So we've also seen NBC, for example, invest in BuzzFeed and Vox. What does a digital media company get out of partnering with an older school TV network?
Yeah, so I think we get a bunch out of this partnership with Discovery. For one, we are going to build an ad sales partnership, and so they've got fantastic relationships with tons of brands that have been buying linear TV for a really long time, and these brands are now coming to them and saying, we don't just want television, but we're also trying to extend these programs into digital, and obviously the digital business is growing quickly. With Group 9, we're really going to be that digital counterpart, where we're actually going to take we're going to build programs that can go from linear to digital, real 360, and I think it's a solution that the market and the partners that we've been working with on the brand side have wanted, but we've never been able to bring to them, and so we're excited about that. And I also think long-form programming is something you're going to see more and more brands get into in the digital space. This is really a video-first business, Group 9, but admittedly, a lot of the stuff that we're creating is shorter form, more built for mobile consumption, and we aspire to be trip-over brands that are living in a bunch of different places. And linear TV, while the bundle is thinning, linear TV is not dead, and there's a bunch of OTT and SVOD options that we could explore, and I think we're going to be pursuing strategies to build longer form content, and Discovery is going to be a great partner to help us understand how to do that and to distribute that content.
So do you think digital media companies can survive on their own anymore, with Google and Facebook taking a bigger share of ad dollars? And, should you be diversifying your revenue sources, and to what?
Well, so I think you can survive. I think it's hard to find a bunch of scale, and you never know what goes on with the sort of the ebbs and flows of the economy. And I think generally speaking, like, being a brand that's sort of hanging out there, a subscale brand in the digital space, isn't a place you really want to be. And so you want to set yourself up to be able to be self-sustaining, to be able to be capitalized for the future, and that was one of the reasons that we put these brands together. But I do think that there's going to be an increasingly strong advertising play in the digital world. Obviously, Google and Facebook are, it's scary to sort of live in their shadow, but we're moving to a world where advertising is becoming opt-in. Quite frankly, consumers don't need to consume content from brands that they don't want to interact with. And what our brands are doing, and what I think a bunch of the other best digitally native businesses are doing, is helping brands figure out how they can create content that people actually want to consume. And, and so we're going to see that growing. But yes, there are other revenue models. Vice has done an incredible job building a big licensing model, selling content, both domestically and internationally. That's been big for them. And then there's services, looking at the traditional agency business and figuring out how you can build that.
Okay. Ben, we'll have to leave it there. Ben Lair, new Group 9 CEO, thanks so much for joining us. Coming up, Studio 1.0 with Instagram's Kevin.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Army officials say 10 soldiers have formally asked to be recognized as their new preferred gender. The figure represents only those who've publicly acknowledged they are transgender. The Pentagon's new policy allowing transgender service members to serve openly began October 1st. Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen will likely resist pressure to step down if Donald Trump's elected president. That's according to people who've known and worked with her over the years. Trump has accused Yellen of keeping interest rates low to protect President Obama. British Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit negotiating stance is no clearer after a meeting with the leaders of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland Monday. That's according to Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who spoke to reporters in London.
Yeah, I don't mind admitting a frustration that I know nothing now about the UK's negotiating strategy that I didn't know before the meeting started. So we need to see a UK government that's prepared to open up and involve us meaningfully.
All three governments have expressed concern about economic damage caused by Brexit. European officials are trying to break an impasse over a trade deal between the European Union and Canada. The problem, objections by the French-speaking Wallonia region of Belgium. Belgian officials say the deal would allow multinationals to crush local companies. I'm Mark Crumpton. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Monday here in New York, 9:30 Tuesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, New Zealand's trading again after a public holiday on Mondays, and it's looking pretty good after the first 90 minutes of trade, up a fifth of 1%. ASX futures indicate a flat start, although that's what we were supposed to have on Monday, and the index ended up declining 1% at the open before recovering about half those losses. So let's just wait and see what the day brings here in Australia. Nikkei futures looking positive, however, and that's as the market in Japan waits on the IPO of JR Kyushu. This is a company that operates bullet trains, hotels and restaurants on Japan's third largest island. The IPO, valued at $4 billion, makes it the third biggest in the world this year. Looks like it's oversubscribed too. JR Kyushu shares up 13% on the grey market ahead of this listing. Take a look at Lotte Group in South Korea as well, due to hold a press conference later today. Could see revival of an IPO plan there as well, worth $4.5 billion. And the company looking to turn around its public relations image as well after a series of indictments in June this year. Also out today in Korea, third quarter GDP. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
Technology, I'm Emily Chang. Our long-form show, Bloomberg Studio 1.0, returns this week for Season 5 with a great lineup of the biggest influencers shaping media and technology, including former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer and Vinod Khosla, founder of Khosla Ventures. In this week's episode, I sat down with Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom for an exclusive interview. Remember, 4 years ago, Facebook bought the photo-sharing app for $1 billion, and CEO Mark Zuckerberg pledged to let the Instagram team work independently. I started by asking Systrom, what kind of kid was he, and what sparked his interest in technology?
I remember my dad got us our first computer at home, and I just played video games all the time. But as I played those video games, I learned you could actually create your own levels. And then I learned programming was the thing, and then I took classes in school and actually wanted to make my own games. It was something that really inspired me. I loved it.
Now, more importantly, perhaps, photography. You also got involved in photography at a young age.
It was hard to find me at a young age without a camera in my hand. Whether it was my dad's Polaroid camera, I used to get in trouble because, you know, those packs, there would be like 10 packs of film. I would go through them and they weren't cheap, but I love taking photos. At least my family has a rich visual history now. And I studied in Florence in college and just sat in the darkroom there developing photos. And that's actually where I learned about filtering. You actually could add these chemicals to the bath, the developing bath, and it would change the colors of the photos. And I brought that along with me to Instagram.
Isn't that where you also learned about square photos?
Yeah. My photography teacher took my nice camera out of my hands and said, "You're going to use this." And it was a plastic camera that took square film format. And I learned to love it. It was easy to take good photos in a square format.
Now, while you were at Stanford, as I understand it, you had an offer to drop out and work at Facebook. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what happened?
There was a girl involved, and I didn't exactly want to leave school. But also, it's amazing. I talked to a lot of my mentors at the time who said, Facebook's a fad, it'll go away. And to this day, I think about that decision. I actually think it was the right decision. I loved finishing, Stanford, and I loved what I learned there. But when I think about it, I think about how many technologies come about that people doubt at first. And I took that with me at Instagram, because the number of people who thought Instagram wouldn't work in the first few years, I mean, still don't think it'll work sometimes. It's kind of hard to refute at this point, but you just have to keep going, and that was one of the lessons as an entrepreneur.
You went on to Google. You interned at Odeo, which became Twitter, working for Evan Williams, and sharing a desk with Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, when I showed up my first day of work at Odeo, I got this puzzled look, and they're like, oh, that's right, we hired an intern. But they were super nice to me, and I mean, honestly, without that experience, I don't think I would have the same passion for social media that I do today. Ev's one of the smartest guys I know. Jack, super creative, an awesome engineer as well. And it was great to meet them and learn from them very early on.
So what did you learn from them?
Number one would be sometimes your first idea doesn't work out. I worked at Odeo, not Twitter. It became Twitter, but I remember very clearly, Odeo not quite working, and then keeping in touch with Jack and Ev as they kind of made that transition, and realizing that often when you're a company, you need to actually pivot into something else. Instagram had a similar history. We were working on a game called Bourbon, and it turned into Instagram.
The first Instagram photo was of your girlfriend's foot with a stray dog.
Yeah.
But it was maybe the first filter that was even more consequential.
Had I known that that was going to be the first photo on Instagram, and that Instagram would get to this place where it has 500 million people using it around the world monthly, I would have tried a little bit harder. My girlfriend at the time is now my wife. And she said, I'm not going to post photos unless I can make them look great, so you probably should add filters. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try making a filter. I made X Pro 2, which was the first filter that we ever created, and I added it to the build, and I took a photo of her foot and a stray dog, and I posted it as a test, and it just lived on forever.
So how quickly did it become something that you realized could be not just big, but really big?
I may have been a little bit optimistic, but the second we launched, I was like, there's something new and different here. I had worked at other companies that struggled to get 100 people to sign up in a day. And that first morning, or actually that first day, we had 25,000 people sign up. And I remember like my eyes were wide. I was like, I've never seen a service grow that quickly day one. The way we saw it, we kind of had lightning in a bottle, and it was our job to capture it and to continue to work on it, not screw it up. And to this day, we think about that as our job, is just keep it going. It's got a life of its own. Don't get in its way, and make it awesome.
Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom there. We'll pick up on the topic of rival Snapchat next. This is Bloomberg. Returning now to Bloomberg Studio 1.0 and my conversation with Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom. In part 2 of my exclusive interview, I asked him about the moment he decided to sell the company to Facebook.
When I look back about the decision to sell to Facebook, I think the pros of it are that we got to pair up with a juggernaut of a company that understands how to grow, understands how to build a business, has one of the best, if not the best, management team in tech, and we got to use them as our resource. So that was really the hope and the dream, and most acquisitions don't work out that way. I mean, you can look over the past years how many acquisitions have failed. Founders have left abruptly after selling because of culture clashes, changes in vision, whatever, misalignment. We've been able to do this for now basically over 4 years, and that's what's awesome about that decision back then. It came true, and I think we got a little lucky, meaning not many people get to this point, but we also worked very hard to get here.
At the time, you were contemplating raising money. You were also talking to Twitter and Jack Dorsey about selling to them, and then Mark Zuckerberg came into the picture. What happened?
The acquisition happened fairly quickly. Mark and I decided that it was the right thing to do and basically closed over a weekend. I think it was Easter weekend. I remember being at his house and us being all right, let's do this. We're aligned. Lawyers were everywhere. We were signing documents. We were figuring this out. And then it was a whirlwind because I think we were in, kind of this no man's land for 6 to 9 months, figuring out whether the deal would go through. And once it did, we were able to partner, and immediately the value became clear because we got together. We were able to fix our infrastructure. By the way, every day that went by, we were struggling to keep the site up, just struggling under our own growth. We were able to figure out spam really quickly. We were having this giant spam attack, and we got them in there and started using their tools immediately to fight spam. A lot of those things happened immediately after the acquisition and just helped the company grow and skyrocket.
So why not Twitter?
I think there were a lot of companies. There was Google, there were a bunch of others that were interested in Instagram's growth. Facebook was the one that took it seriously, and I think Mark acted very quickly and decisively. But at the same time, I mean, you look at the pairing now and it just feels native. It feels like it makes sense.
So Google was interested in buying you guys too?
I think every company at that point was. I don't think it was Google specifically. It was just companies were interested in what Instagram was up to. We were a bit of an anomaly because people would see us and we would be 13 people, but at the same time, we had all this growth and people kind of couldn't get why those two things could be true at the same time. And I think a lot of people wrote off photos. I think no one quite understood how important photos would be for the future of social media and expression. I mean, if you look at the way people express themselves now, it's not through just chat, it's through photos and sending them to each other. No one quite understood that was the revolution that Instagram was about to embark on at the time.
Facebook bought Instagram for about $1 billion. A year later, Citigroup valued it at $35 billion. In that moment, did you ever think, oh no, what did I just do? No.
I think every entrepreneur measures value on impact, or at least I hope they would. If you talk to Mark, I mean, he gave away 99% of his wealth. We're not in this game to make money. We're in this game to change the world. And if you talk to entrepreneurs that matter, the Elons, the Larrys, the Sergeys, they all measure value based on what did we just do for the world? Did we create something that didn't exist before? Did we unlock some kind of value? And that's what Mike and I focus on every single day. When
Mark Zuckerberg bought your company, he pledged to let you work independently. Has he lived up to that? Mark has been true to his word and then some. Still to this day, Mark's interaction with the company basically is through meetings with me. And I've learned a tremendous amount from him about our transition to advertising, about our transition to a more global community, about strategy. He's one of the most interesting long-term strategic thinkers I've ever met. Think of it like having the best board member in the world. I mean, imagine how many companies would love to have Mark Zuckerberg on their board. That's what we get, and it's independent, but also you get amazing guidance and amazing counsel from someone who's been able to build a tremendous company. I think our transition to advertising was an interesting one. I was of the belief that if we had fewer advertisers, they'd be higher quality, and it actually turned out to be the opposite. If you have more advertisers and you're able to bring in an entire ecosystem where they compete against each other in an auction, you actually get higher quality advertisements. That's something that I didn't realize at the time. And I remember him saying, I felt the exact same way when we introduced advertising, and it turns out there's this other thing.
I was able to learn a lot from him there.
You mentioned you meet with not just Mark, but also Jan and Brendan.
Yeah.
How do you see Instagram taking advantage of some of the more futuristic things that Facebook is working on, like virtual reality?
Well, if our vision is to make you feel like you can travel anywhere in the world in a fraction of a second and experience whatever's happening in the world, imagine a day when you can put on a headset and be at a Coldplay concert, seeing something happen like a big protest or a big riot anywhere in the world, or something as simple as a friend's wedding. That's the kind of experience we'd love to create, and I think virtual reality in the coming years will play a critical role in seeing that vision come true.
How about artificial intelligence?
Well, we use it today. I mean, that's what powers advertising and making sure that we have the right amount of targeting.
Do you see more of it in the future?
Oh, for sure. I mean, one thing I've learned through the history of Instagram is that the more personalization you have, if we can have an experience that caters to you, the individual, if we know your interests, if we know what you engage with, we can use machine learning and artificial intelligence to make a much, much better experience for you on Instagram.
What about e-commerce? Do you think about adding a buy button to Instagram? Are there any plans for that?
I'm really excited about the future of e-commerce on Instagram. Where we start and where we end are two very different places. I mean, we effectively have a buy button right now. It doesn't complete the transaction on Instagram, and I think that's okay. Where we're starting is letting advertisers get to their audience, promote their own products or posts, and then basically from there, they take action on the advertiser's website. If we can make that more seamless in the future, of course we will. It's just we're starting to walk before we run.
Who do you view as competition?
Where do I start? I mean, we as consumers only have limited amount of time to pull out our phones and do something. So anyone who's competing for time.
One employee told us that they're concerned that Facebook and Instagram aren't more scared of Snapchat. Are you afraid enough of Snapchat?
I don't think it's our job to be afraid so much as understand what's happening in the world. I think we are competing against many different services for time and eyeballs, et cetera. But getting to 500 million users around the world is a big feat. I mean, 300 million of those are daily actives. That's 300 million people that open up Instagram every single day, 21 minutes a day. That's a big feat. We are absolutely not sitting, happy thinking that that's going to last forever. We need to keep innovating and keep introducing products.
Harassment is a problem across all of social media. One singer recently reportedly attempted suicide after reading some comments on Instagram. Do you think Instagram needs to take a harder line here?
I think we work very, very hard on it. We take every report of abuse or harassment very, very seriously. We provide tools to a lot of our public figures to moderate their comments. And it's something we're focusing a lot on over the next year. It's unacceptable for that to exist on any platform, and we're going to be a platform that takes it very seriously, and we do take it very seriously.
Instagram CEO Kevin Systrom there. Up next, how he was able to get the Pope on board. This is Bloomberg. Instagram's Kevin Systrom is widely known for being a very product-focused CEO. In part 3 of our conversation, he explains how he hired Twitter's former product chief, Kevin Weil.
Product management is also very different than product strategy. So building product is much more operational, is much more like the guts of the machine. How do you build product? Once you have an idea, how do you get it to become a reality? And that's something I think Kevin brings an amazing expertise to Instagram. He has done that before. He's seen it at scale. I don't like to say I'm actually a good product manager. I think the team will attest, but I love thinking strategically. So when you combine Kevin's personality and expertise and my personality and my expertise, not only do you get two Kevins, but you also get a great pair that I think is kind of like a yin and a yang of the product process.
I noticed you haven't used your Twitter handle much recently. You have a very simple Twitter handle at Kevin since you got there so early.
Yeah.
Do you think Twitter can turn itself around? Do you think Twitter can reaccelerate growth?
Well, I probably should use my Twitter account. It's actually an amazing platform, and I think every company at this along their course of growth will hit speed bumps. It happens. It's happened to Instagram, it's happened to Facebook, and it's all about how you get out of that. And that's a hard question to answer from anyone's perspective, and I just respect a lot of what they've done in the past year.
You mentioned that every day gets more complicated, but how much of Instagram's success has been a focus and commitment to simplicity?
I think that's actually the complex part of Instagram, is like, it's easy to let a product get bloated. It's easy to say to every employee, you know what, guys, just go work on it, whatever you want, we'll see what sticks. Before you know it, you've got a product that's all over the place, it doesn't have a singular voice, and that itself is complex. Managing to get something to be simple and be straightforward, even though it has a tremendous amount of complexity behind the scenes, that's the hardest part of any CEO's job, is actually saying no more than you say yes.
What are some features that you pondered or threw around that you ultimately said no?
Well, we had a lot of people asking for sponsored filters at one point. I think like there was a toothpaste company that wanted a teeth whitening filter, and like, that's a funny example, but it makes sense because it's like, oh, we got filters, we should probably just do sponsored versions. We focused on simplicity and doing the right thing by the consumer, which is like to not make them so commercial, make them great, and focus on what people love most about them. There are decisions like that every day that are like easy, you can make a few bucks probably by doing them, but they end up adding complexity to the product, and it doesn't actually add a lot to your bottom line either.
You redesigned your logo, which some people did not like. Adweek,
really?
Adweek called it a travesty.
Oh, yeah.
What did you learn from that?
I knew going into it that it would be a difficult change. There's not a single company I've seen, whether you're Starbucks or Gap, right, like that has changed their logo and it has been easy. There's not a single company. I think the question is, how much work have you put into it before you get there? How much resolve do you have? Are you doing it for the right reasons? What we wanted to do was give people an idea that we weren't just about photography. We were more general than that. We were about creativity, thus the colors, thus the simplicity. We wanted something that would scale across different mediums, that would look great on a phone, great on a t-shirt, great on a billboard, great anywhere. Our current logo, or at least the one that we had, wouldn't do that. As much as I love it because I had a heavy hand in designing it, right? The current one I didn't have a heavy hand in other than helping the team along. We have an amazing design team that thought through all these things. They did this awesome presentation of the evolution of brands throughout time. And what you see with every brand is that it goes from being complex to simpler and simpler and simpler to iconic. You can do that with Apple, AT&T, you name it, the big brands, they do this. We just skipped a few parts. And that's okay, because it's going to be hard. What did I learn? It's hard. What did I also learn? It's going to be okay.
Your timeline is now algorithmic as opposed to reverse chronological. Some people also didn't like that. How's that worked out? Is it working the way that you hoped, even though some people weren't?
Yes, it's absolutely working the way we hoped. I mean, engagement is up because of it. It means that people are liking Instagram more. They have more feedback on their posts, more feedback on the posts that they actually want to give feedback to. The good news about an algorithmic feed is that unlike what people believe, it's not actually not chronological, it's fairly chronological. It just takes the stuff that you haven't seen and it reorders it to make sure that you see the best stuff at the top. People miss more than 70% of their feed, and that's not okay with us. It's not okay to them.
You've been traveling around the world. You're at fashion shows. You're at major events. What have the last few years been like for you personally?
I don't think I would say like the nerd in high school would be at a fashion show someday. It still feels weird, but I go to these things because I am a representative of the brand and of Instagram. And I believe by having relationships with people in these different industries, whether it's the Pope and onboarding the Pope, or doing fashion dinners with Anna Wintour, those things are like, they couldn't be more different, but they're both extremely important to the community on Instagram.
You personally onboarded the Pope, and you met him not once but twice.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Really inspirational. I mean, there are not many moments in life when you think, first of all, like, why am I here? But also, when it happens, you realize, I'm going to remember this moment for my entire life. When you realize that you can onboard someone who will go down in the history books for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that they're choosing your product to connect with the people that care most about their message, that's awesome.
Instagram's Kevin Systrom there. Will be all over Apple earnings tomorrow. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Tech. This is Bloomberg.